Most people do not fail at calisthenics because they are lazy. They fail because they have no clear direction. One day they are doing push-ups, the next day they are trying pull-ups. Then they see a muscle up online and decide to chase that instead. They are always training, but they never know whether they are actually getting closer to a goal. If I had to start calisthenics from zero today, I would follow one simple system. And by the end of this video, you will know exactly what that system is. I have trained calisthenics seriously for around 3 to 4 years, although I first started experimenting with it much earlier. During that time, I made a lot of avoidable mistakes. I trained with incorrect form. I did not eat enough protein. I procrastinated. I relied on motivation instead of discipline. And I spent too much time doing exercises without a clear structure. If I started again today, I would simplify everything into 4 stages. Choose one goal. Build the foundations that support it. Train consistently. Then progress when you have actually earned the next level. That is the entire roadmap. The details matter, but the order matters even more. The first thing I would do is choose one main goal, not 5 goals. Not every impressive skill I see online. One goal. For example, let us say your goal is your first strict pull-up. That goal now becomes the filter for your training. Every exercise should answer one question. Does this help me get closer to a clean pull-up? If it does, it stays. If it does not, it probably does not deserve most of your attention right now. This does not mean you can never train anything else. It means you have one priority, while everything else supports or maintains your general strength. The mistake I made early on was trying to do too much at once. Push-ups, dips, pull-ups, muscle-ups, different routines, different advice. It felt productive because I was doing a lot, but activity is not the same as progress. Once you choose the goal, you work backwards. A muscle-up is a good example. A muscle-up looks like one movement, but it depends on several qualities. You need strong pull-ups. You need enough pushing strength for the transition and dip. You need body control. You need technique. If those foundations are weak, repeatedly attempting the full skill usually becomes frustrating and inefficient. The same principle applies to almost every calisthenics goal. Do not begin with the hardest version because it looks impressive. Begin with the version you can control. Then make that movement stronger, cleaner, and more consistent. One of my biggest mistakes was performing exercises with poor form just to complete the repetition. That might satisfy your ego for a moment, but it makes it harder to measure real progress. A controlled pull-up is more valuable than a higher number of rushed repetitions. A clean dip is more useful than forcing extra repetitions through a reduced range of motion. Control comes before difficulty. Once the goal and progression are clear, I would build a simple weekly structure. I would not create a completely different workout every day. I would repeat a small number of useful movements often enough to improve them. For example, if my main goal was improving my pull-ups, one session might focus mainly on pulling strength. Another session could maintain pushing strength through push-ups and dips while also training supporting movements. A third session could return to the main pull-up progression and focus on quality technique. The exact exercises will depend on your current ability, but the principle stays the same. Your week should repeatedly train the qualities required for your main goal. You do not need a new routine every week. You need a routine that is useful enough to repeat and simple enough to follow. That is where discipline becomes more important than motivation. I used to procrastinate and wait until I felt ready, but progress improved when I stopped negotiating with myself and trained even when I did not feel perfectly motivated. Discipline pushed me out of my comfort zone, and over time, the work that once felt difficult became normal. There are 3 mistakes I would avoid if I started again. The first is trying to improve everything at once. You can maintain several abilities, but you should still know your main priority. Otherwise, your attention and recovery get divided across too many goals. The second mistake is using poor form just to say you completed the exercise. I made this mistake myself. A bad pull-up can make you feel stronger than you really are. But when you compare it with a clean repetition, the difference becomes obvious. Use honest standards, full range of motion, controlled movement, consistent technique. The third mistake is changing your plan before it has enough time to work. One week you follow one routine. The next week you copy somebody else. Then you start again. Your body needs repeated practice to adapt. Do not confuse boredom with failure. Are exactly what you still need. Training is only one part of the system. Another mistake I made was not eating enough protein. You can train hard, but if your nutrition and recovery are consistently poor, you are making progress harder than it needs to be. You do not need a perfect diet, but you do need enough food, enough protein, enough sleep, and enough recovery to support your training. The goal is not to make nutrition complicated. It is to stop ignoring the basics. Train with purpose. Eat enough to recover. Sleep properly. Then repeat. How to track real progress. I would track progress using a few simple measures. First, are my repetitions becoming cleaner? Second, can I perform more high-quality repetitions than before? Third, am I completing the sessions I planned? Fourth, am I moving to a harder progression without losing control? Progress is not only the final skill, it is also better technique, more strength, more consistency, and greater control. That matters because dramatic progress does not happen every week. Sometimes the improvement is one cleaner repetition. Sometimes it is one extra pull-up. Sometimes it is showing up when you would normally procrastinate. Those small improvements compound. Following these principles helped me reach skills I am genuinely proud of. I learned the muscle up. I became strong enough to perform weighted pull-ups and weighted dips at 17. But those results did not come from constantly changing direction. They came from building strength, improving technique, and becoming more disciplined. If I had to start calisthenics today, I would not search for the perfect routine. I would choose one goal, work backwards into the correct progressions, train those progressions consistently, use honest form, eat enough protein, recover properly, and track whether I was actually improving. Before your next workout, choose one goal and write down the first movement you need to master. That is where your progress starts. Subscribe if you want practical calisthenics videos focused on real progress instead of random workouts.